I thought taking bills into underwear was your prerogative, he adds with a smirk. And if you believed this trick would work on me, it won't. Now, either accept my help graciously or continue doing whatever you were doing. He looks at the boy with a satisfied, now fully formed grin, still holding on to Jungkook's wrist. But know that I won't interpret it as gratitude or working off as you may have thought. If you want to do what you started doing, it will be solely your desire, sweet thing. He leans back on the couch, releasing Jungkook from his grip, and looks expectantly at the bewildered boy. Then, arching an eyebrow, he continues. So, what now? Jungkook exhales loudly, suddenly falling back onto the man's lap, bracing himself with his hands against the Taehyung's chest, breathing heavily, and locking eyes with him. Taehyung smirks, adjusting himself slightly, and leans towards Jungkook's ear, whispering heatedly. But this is solely your desire, you understand? Jungkook nods slightly, trying to control his heavy breathing. Taehyung exhales noisily in his ear. He breathes noisily in the man's ear. I've never. I mean, to anyone, okay? Taehyung nods lostly, burying his nose in the boy's neck, and greedily inhales Jungkook's scent. It's okay. I really like what you're doing. Doing it so well for me, baby boy. Jungkook speeds up his movements, closing his eyes and resting his forehead on the man's shoulder. Don't hurt me, baby, he whispers. Jungkook nods, trying to move his hands just as Mr. Kim did a few days ago, pleasuring him, and he reaches for the man's neck. Mr. Kim, Jungkook whispers, hesitating him under the jaw, and Taehyung groans lowly, tilting his head back slightly. Mr. Kim. You're so. Taehyung growls, pulling the boy closer and Jungkook purrs, feeling bites between. Jungkook once again weakly buries his face in Taehyung's shoulder, and they both breathe heavily, trying to come to their senses. You did so well, sweet thing, the man rasps. You made me feel so good. There's a devilish gleam in Taehyung's gaze as he gently grasps the boy's wrist, lifting his hand higher, bringing Jungkook's fingertips to the boy's lips. Jungkook can't break their eye contact, like they're having a staring contest, and Taehyung, grinning, runs Jungkook's fingers across his lips. Jungkook and Taehyung can't help himself as his eyes reflexively move lower, watching the movements. The boy exhales noisily, leaning towards the man's cheek. Thank you for helping me out, Mr. Kim. And now I'll do as you said and go to rest, he whispers, then hesitantly him on the cheek again, like at the very beginning, and, taking advantage of the moment, he gets off his lap, doesn't say another word and goes into the bedroom. Taehyung is still breathing heavily, looking in front of him, as if he still feels the warmth from the boy's body. As soon as Jungkook closes the door behind him, he leans against it, silently pressing the back of his head against the solid wood, and exhales loudly, covering his eyes. He can still taste the man on his own lips. He lets out a lost whimper, shaking his head, and walks to the neatly arranged bed, falling onto his back. With a clean hand, Jungkook pulls up the blanket and, contemplating for just a few seconds, he bites his lip, and, closing his eyes, lifts the blanket. He whines, gritting his teeth. As soon as he feels something hot, he begins to move. Jungkook presses his head into the pillows as low. Jungkook speeds up his movements, feeling the desired release trembling somewhere very close, and desperately begs himself not to be loud. Taehyung takes a few sips of coffee to clear his head. Quickly adjusting his clothes, he stands up, deciding it's a good reason to step out onto the balcony for a cigarette, even though he rarely smokes. He frowns, trying to recall where he might have left the pack, realizing it's probably still on the shelf in the wardrobe since he took it out of his jacket pocket a few days ago. On cotton-like legs, he moves towards the bedroom, pausing by the door when he hears something quite familiar from inside. A smirk plays on the corners of his lips, and he tries to open the door as quietly as possible, peeking through the crack. Confirming his suspicions, there's a pleasant warmth in his stomach as he witnesses the rather explicit movements of the young boy under the covers. He only observes for a few moments, and although a twinge of conscience flutters somewhere in his chest, he decides to simply close the door, attempting to leave it unnoticed. Taehower, something suddenly makes him freeze. "Mr. Kim," Jungkook whispers brokenly, tossing on the pillow. Taehyung inhales deeply, still silently opening the door and slowly walking into the room until he stops a few meters from the foot of the bed. Clearing his throat, Taehyung watches as Jungkook startles, the boy's eyes wide open. Jungkook looks at him utterly bewildered, pulling the blanket higher and hunching his knees. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Taehyung innocently asks. "I heard you whimpering. My temperature seems to have risen," Jungkook mumbles, swallowing hard. Taehyung barely holds back a chuckle. Temperature? Why didn't you tell me, baby?" Taehyung raises his eyebrows, shaking his head. "Let's check it, shall we?" No, sir, there's no need," Jungkook unexpectedly shouts. Quiet, sweetheart." Taehyung smirks, tilting his head and biting a second, studying him. "Why stop? It hurts, doesn't it, babe?" he asks, and Jungkook, in desperation, nods, still thinking Taehyung is referring to the headache. Jungkook doesn't hold back, tossing himself back on the pillow. "Damn," it races through his head. "Get rid of the blanket," Taehyung orders, swallowing hard, and Jungkook doesn't argue. He just throws the blanket, exposing his own desperation to the man. Taehyung nods contentedly, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips, and he immerses himself in Jungkook Taehyung's lips, watching this utterly beautiful Jungkook drowning in pleasure. He slowly circles the bed, approaching it from Jungkook's side. Leaning on the mattress with one hand, looming over Jungkook, he brushes away some damp curls from his forehead, then runs the tips of his fingers across the velvety skin of his cheek. "You're so beautiful like that, baby," Taehyung whispers, smiling at the corner of his lips, and leans a bit more. "But it's a shame you didn't ask for my help," he adds. Jungkook breathes heavily, still not daring to open his eyes. The next morning, they're eating breakfast in silence. Jungkook pokes at the remnants of sweet porridge in his bowl, deciding to leave the portion of eggs and bacon untouched. He lifts a slightly uncertain gaze to Taehyung, who sits across from him, calmly having breakfast and, surprisingly, reading a freshly delivered morning newspaper that appeared out of nowhere. "Mr. Kim," calls softly, and Taehyung immediately looks up. "Yes, baby." "Mr. Kim, may I ask you for something?" Taehyung sets the newspaper aside, smirking slightly, and looks at him with a more intrigued expression. "Of course, you can, sweetheart. You can ask me for anything. I really want to go outside, sir. I feel much better than in the first few days, and I think some fresh air would do me good." "Please." Taehyung remains silent for a few seconds, bringing his fingers to his chin and rubbing it thoughtfully. "Outside?" he asks again, sighing lightly. Jungkook immediately nods. "Do you mean, to take a walk? Do you just want to stroll? Or do you want to go home?" "Well, Obviously, you're not going to let me go home. The boy snorts, surprisingly without negativity, and Taehyung nods in agreement. But I really want to at least take a short walk. I don't like being cooped up for so many days in a row, Mr. Kim. No one is keeping you cooped up. But you're still getting better, Jungkook, and I just care about you. I know, Jungkook unexpectedly exclaims. And I appreciate your care, sir. I really feel much better, and I'm very grateful that you're so concerned about me. But I just want to take a little walk. Please? Even dogs get walked more often. Taehyung frowns, shaking his head. Stop talking as if I equate you to my pet, he responds, slightly annoyed. I treat you much better, and I've never given you reason to think otherwise. Jungkook lowers his gaze to his plate, nodding. I know. I apologize, sir. That's not what I meant. I just want some fresh air. And you measured my temperature yourself when I woke up. You know the fever is gone. Taehyung